"You're always the embarrassment," my family said every holiday. So when I bought my dream condo, I threw a huge party and sent invites to everyone but them. They found out on Instagram. Their reaction was priceless. I, 32M, have spent my entire life as the designated family embarrassment. It wasn't a title I chose, but one that was bestowed upon me at every holiday, every gathering, every single time we were all under one roof. It was a slow burn, a brand seared into my identity by 1,000 tiny cuts. My career choice, graphic design instead of law like my brother, was the opening salvo. They called it playing with crayons for a living. My apartment in the city, which was all I could afford in my early 20s, was the shoebox. My girlfriend at the time was not our kind of people. The car I drove, a reliable used sedan, was a rust bucket. Every Christmas, Easter, and Thanksgiving followed the same script. We'd sit around the dinner table, and my father would ask my brother about his latest case, listening with rapt attention. He'd ask my sister about her ever-expanding family, praising her for giving him grandchildren. Then, all eyes would turn to me. The question was always the same, dripping with a unique blend of pity and disdain. They'd ask if I was still working on my little projects, or if I had considered getting a real job. My mother would sigh dramatically, telling the table how she worries about me, how I'm not settled like my siblings. The embarrassment label was usually uttered by my aunt, often after a few glasses of wine. She'd lean over to my mother, loud enough for me to hear, and remark on how every family has one, and it's just their bad luck I was theirs. I used to fight it. I tried to explain my career, the projects I was proud of, the slow but steady progress I was making. It was like shouting into a void. My successes were dismissed as flukes, my struggles as proof of their predictions. My brother, the golden child, would smirk from across the table, occasionally offering me patronizing advice about growing up. My sister would just look down at her plate, a silent accomplice. The worst part wasn't the insults themselves, but the unity of it all. It was them against me, a unified front of judgment that I could never penetrate. The final straw came 2 Christmases ago. I had just landed a major contract with a tech firm to lead a rebranding campaign. It was the biggest achievement of my career, the culmination of years of late nights and relentless pitching. I was genuinely excited to share the news, foolishly thinking that this, finally, would be enough. I waited for the lull in conversation, cleared my throat, and announced my new role. For a moment, there was silence. I saw a flicker of something in my father's eyes. Was it surprise? Pride? It was gone in a second. My brother spoke first. He asked if that meant I'd finally be able to afford to fix the dent in my car. My aunt chimed in, wondering aloud if my doodling was really a stable career path, especially with the economy being what it was. My mother just patted my hand and told me it was nice, that I was keeping busy, her voice laced with the same old pity. But it was my father's reaction that shattered the last of my hope. He looked at me, not with pride, but with a weary resignation. He told me it was a good start, but that I shouldn't get my hopes up. He suggested I talk to my brother's friend who worked in IT, saying there might be a real position for me there, something with benefits and a future. He said it in front of everyone. He took my biggest professional victory and, in one sentence, reduced it to a stepping stone for a real job. I felt the familiar heat rise in my cheeks, the shame, the anger. But this time, something else was there, clarity. I looked around the table at their faces, my smug brother, my pitying mother, my dismissive father, and I realized they would never see me. They would only ever see the caricature they had created, the embarrassment. I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. I just smiled, a tight, thin smile that didn't reach my eyes. I excused myself from the table, claiming I had an early morning. The drive home was quiet. I didn't play music. I just let the silence ring in my ears. And in that silence, a decision took root. I was done. I was done seeking their approval. I was done being their punching bag. I wasn't just going to distance myself. I was going to build a life so full, so successful, and so happy that their opinions would become nothing more than a faint, irrelevant echo. And when I did, they wouldn't be a part of it. That night, I opened my laptop and created a new folder on my desktop. I named it The Project. It had nothing to do with graphic design and everything to do with building my escape. The first file I created was a budget. The second was a 5-year plan. The goal was simple: buy my dream condo in the heart of the city, a place so undeniably impressive that it couldn't be dismissed as a shoebox. It would be my fortress of solitude, my testament to the success they never believed I could achieve. And I would celebrate it not with them, but with everyone who had ever supported me. The revenge wouldn't be loud or confrontational. It would be quiet, elegant, and absolute. It would be an invitation they would never receive. The next 2 years were a blur of relentless work. I poured every ounce of my energy into my career. The tech firm contract was a massive success, and it opened doors I'd only ever dreamed of. One major client led to another. I took on side projects, worked weekends, and saved every penny I could. My life became a cycle of work, sleep, repeat. I declined family invitations, offering vague excuses about deadlines. They didn't push. In their minds, I was just flailing away at my little projects in my shoebox. They had no idea I was building an empire while they slept. My social life dwindled, but a few key people stuck by me. My best friend from college, who had always believed in my talent. A couple of old colleagues who had become genuine friends. They saw the fire in my eyes and cheered me on. They were my real family. Finally, after 2 years of disciplined saving and a booming portfolio, I did it. I found the perfect place. It was a corner unit on the 30th floor of a new high-rise, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the entire city. It had a wraparound balcony, a gourmet kitchen, and 2 spacious bedrooms. The moment I walked in, I knew it was the one. It was the physical manifestation of my hard work, a monument to every no, every dismissive comment, every pitying look I had ever received. The closing process was a quiet, personal victory. I signed the papers with a hand that barely shook. I stood in the empty living room, the city lights twinkling below, and felt a profound sense of peace. I had done it. I had built my castle. Now for phase 2. The party. This wasn't just going to be a housewarming. It was going to be a coronation. I spent a month planning it. I hired a catering company I couldn't have afforded a year ago. I bought cases of champagne. I curated a playlist that was celebratory and defiant. And then, I made the guest list. This was the most important part. I scrolled through my contacts, and it felt like I was dividing my life into 2 columns, before and after. On the invite list went my friends, my supportive colleagues, my mentors, and even a few distant cousins who had always been kind to me at those dreadful family gatherings. I invited people who saw me for who I was, not who my family wanted me to be. The list grew to over 100 people. Then, I looked at the names of my immediate family: my mother, my father, my brother, my sister, my aunt. I hovered over their names for a moment, a fleeting pang of something, not guilt, but maybe nostalgia for a family I wished I had. I took a deep breath and deleted them from the list. I blocked their numbers for the week of the party to ensure my peace. The invitations went out, elegant digital cards with a stunning photo of the city view from my new balcony. The RSVPs started pouring in almost immediately. The night of the party was surreal. My condo, which had been empty and silent just weeks before, was now filled with laughter, music, and the clinking of glasses. People I respected, people I admired, were all there, in my home, celebrating with me. My old boss pulled me aside and told me he always knew I had it in me. My best friend gave a toast, his voice thick with emotion, telling everyone how proud he was of the man I'd become. As I stood on the balcony, a glass of champagne in my hand, I looked out at the sprawling metropolis below. I felt a sense of vindication so pure and so powerful it almost brought me to my tears. This was real. This was my life. Around 11 p.m., my best friend came up to me, a mischievous grin on his face. He showed me his phone. He had posted a picture to his Instagram story an hour earlier. It was a group shot of 10 of us on the balcony, with the glittering skyline as our backdrop. I was in the center, laughing, surrounded by friends. He had tagged me in it. The caption read, "Celebrating my best friend's incredible new place. So proud of you, man. The view from the top is well-deserved." I smiled. The bait was in the water. I knew my sister and brother followed my friend. I knew my aunt was an Instagram addict. It was only a matter of time. I put my phone on silent, but left it on the kitchen counter where I could see the screen. I wanted to watch the storm roll in. For the next hour, I mingled, I laughed, and I soaked in every moment of my victory. I felt light, free from the weight of their judgment for the first time in my life. Then it began. The screen of my phone lit up. It was a text from my sister. Then another. Then a missed call. The screen didn't go dark for the next 20 minutes. A cascade of notifications began to pour in. Missed calls from my mother. A string of angry texts from my brother. Voicemail alerts. The sheer volume was staggering. My friends noticed me looking at the phone, and I just gave them a calm smile and shrugged. I told them it was nothing important. Later that night, after the last guest had left and the silence had returned, I finally picked up the phone. It felt heavy in my hand, a conduit for all the toxicity I had just celebrated escaping. There were 17 missed calls from my mother, 12 from my father, and a barrage of over 30 text messages from my brother and sister combined. My brother's texts were a predictable mix of fury and disbelief. He demanded to know what my problem was. He called me petty, childish, and an embarrassment for airing our family business in public, a breathtaking lack of self-awareness. He wrote that he couldn't believe I would throw a party and not invite my own family. He accused me of doing it just to hurt them. He wasn't wrong. My sister's messages were different. They started with confusion, asking if I had a new place and why she didn't know. They quickly morphed into wounded accusations. She asked me how I could be so cruel, especially to Mom and Dad. She said Mom was crying. She tried to guilt trip me, reminding me that we are family, the very phrase they used to justify their cruelty for years. I saved my mother's voicemails for last. I pressed play, and her voice, trembling with a mixture of rage and theatrical sorrow, filled my silent apartment. She didn't ask why. She demanded. She demanded to know how I could humiliate her like this. She said my aunt had called her, asking why she wasn't at her own son's party. She wailed about how I was tearing the family apart, how I was ungrateful for all they had done for me. All they had done. The irony was so thick I could have choked on it. I listened to every message, read every text, and I felt nothing. The anger I expected to feel wasn't there. The guilt my sister tried so desperately to inspire never materialized. All I felt was a calm, quiet certainty. I had made the right decision. They weren't angry that they had missed a party. They were angry that they had lost control. They were angry that the embarrassment had built a life where their opinions were no longer required. Their reaction wasn't just priceless. It was proof. It was the final, validating piece of my newfound freedom. I slept better that night than I had in years. Update 1. It's been a week since the party, or as my phone log calls it, the Great Notification Apocalypse. The initial barrage of frantic calls and texts has subsided, replaced by a more strategic, and in some ways, more insidious campaign. The anger didn't work, so now they're trying a different tactic, weaponized guilt, delivered by flying monkeys. My cousin, the kind one I actually invited to the party, called me a few days ago. Her tone was uneasy. She told me my mother had called her, sobbing, saying she didn't know what she did to deserve such a cruel son. My aunt had apparently been fanning the flames, telling everyone in the extended family who would listen that I had disowned them over nothing, that I was arrogant now that I had a little bit of money. My cousin explained she was just calling because she was worried about me and the family. I told her I appreciated her concern, but that this was the result of 2 decades of being treated like the family joke. I explained that I didn't disown them. I just chose to celebrate a milestone with people who were genuinely happy for me. There was a long pause on her end, and then she quietly told me she understood. That was a small relief. The main event, however, came yesterday. An email from my father. He's not a man of many words, so seeing a long block of text from him was jarring. It wasn't angry like my brother's texts or hysterical like my mother's voicemails. It was worse. It was a masterclass in psychological manipulation. He started by saying he was disappointed in my actions. He wrote that they had always tried to motivate me, to toughen me up for the real world. He claimed their critiques came from a place of love. He painted a picture of himself as a concerned father, just trying to steer his wayward son onto the right path. He said my brother's success in law was a tough act to follow, and they were only trying to push me to be my best self. The line that really got me was this: "You've mistaken concern for criticism. You were always so sensitive." He was rewriting history. He was taking their relentless bullying and reframing it as a well-intentioned, if poorly executed, parenting strategy. He was telling me that the problem wasn't their behavior, but my reaction to it. My sensitivity was the issue, not their cruelty. He ended the email by saying the door was always open, but that I needed to be the one to walk through it and apologize for the pain and embarrassment I had caused them, especially my mother. I read the email 3 times. The old me, the boy who craved his father's approval, would have buckled. A part of me, a small, wounded part, almost did. The guilt was a phantom limb. I knew it wasn't real, but I could still feel it ache. I walked out onto my balcony, the same spot where I had felt so triumphant on the night of the party. The city was spread out before me, indifferent and beautiful. It was a reminder of what I had built on my own terms. I thought about their motivation. I thought about the Christmas where they ridiculed my greatest professional achievement. I thought about the dozens of small humiliations that felt like death by 1,000 cuts. Their concern was never about building me up. It was about keeping me in my place, the designated failure that made their own lives look better by comparison. I went back inside, sat down at my desk, and started to type a reply. I explained, calmly and without emotion, that I did not mistake concern for criticism. I told him that concern doesn't involve mockery at the dinner table. Concern doesn't dismiss your child's passions. Concern doesn't label your own son an embarrassment. I stated, very clearly, that their version of love was something I could no longer have in my life. I ended it by telling him that I was not the one who needed to apologize. The door to my life wasn't closed, I wrote, but the price of admission was accountability, and I didn't see them paying it anytime soon. I hit send. I felt a tremor in my hand as I did it, the finality of the act settling in. The response came less than an hour later. It was a single sentence from him. "I see you've made your choice." Yes, I have. And for the first time, it truly feels like my own. Update 2. It's been a month since my last update, and the silence has been deafening. After my father's final, terse email, the communication from my immediate family stopped completely. No calls, no texts, no manipulative emails. It was the cold shoulder on an epic scale. My brother and sister unfollowed me on social media. It was as if I had ceased to exist. Honestly, the first couple of weeks were bliss. It was the peace I had been craving for years. I focused on work, enjoyed my new condo, and spent time with the friends who had celebrated with me. There was no background dread, no waiting for the next passive-aggressive comment or guilt-inducing phone call. It was just quiet. But the silence was also a weapon. My extended family, however, had not received the memo to go silent. The narrative my aunt had been spinning had taken hold. At a cousin's birthday dinner, the cousin who called me an update one, she's become a quiet ally. Another aunt cornered me by the appetizers. She didn't yell. She spoke in a low, disappointed tone, telling me that whatever my issues were, I should never have turned my back on my parents. She said that my father was heartbroken and my mother wasn't sleeping. She told me I was being selfish. I didn't engage. I just gave her a polite nod and said I was sorry she felt that way, then walked away. But it was a stark reminder that this wasn't over. I hadn't just severed a few toxic relationships. I had detonated a bomb in the middle of a complex family ecosystem, and the fallout was still settling. The real turning point came last week. I received a registered letter. My heart sank when I saw the return address. It was from my parents' lawyer. I stood in my hallway for a good 10 minutes, just staring at the envelope, my mind racing through 100 worst-case scenarios. Were they suing me? For what? Emotional distress? It seemed insane, but then again, so did their entire reaction. With trembling hands, I opened it. It wasn't a lawsuit. It was a formal letter regarding my grandmother's inheritance. She had passed away 3 years ago, leaving behind a small trust to be divided among her grandchildren upon my grandfather's passing or when the youngest grandchild, my sister's kid, turned 18, whichever came later. The letter, drafted by my father's attorney, was a proposal to buy out my share of the trust immediately. It was clinical and cold. It laid out the estimated value of my share and offered me a lump sum, slightly below market value, in exchange for signing away all future claims. The implication was clear. This wasn't an act of kindness. This was a transaction. This was them trying to scrub me from the family ledger, to pay me off and finalize the separation. They were severing the last financial tie that bound us together. The letter included a line, clearly dictated by my father, stating that this would simplify the family's financial affairs and allow all parties to move forward independently. I laughed. It was a hollow, bitter sound that echoed in my beautiful, empty living room. After all the drama, all the emotional warfare, it came down to a business deal. They wanted to buy my silence, to purchase my absence. They couldn't stand the idea of having to deal with me in the future, even through a lawyer, when the trust finally paid out. I thought about it for a day. I could refuse, just to be difficult. I could drag it out, force them to deal with me down the line. That would be the petty thing to do, the kind of move my brother would pull. But what would that accomplish? It would just keep me tethered to them, embroiled in their drama for years to come. It would be a victory for them, because it would mean they were still occupying space in my head. Freedom, I realized, wasn't about winning skirmishes. It was about ending the war. I called my own lawyer the next day. I had him review the proposal. He confirmed it was a lowball offer, as expected. I told him to counter. Not for a lot more, just for the actual, fair market value of my share. I wasn't going to let them cheat me, but I wasn't going to get into a protracted battle either. I wanted a clean break. I wanted this to be the last piece of business I ever conducted with them. My lawyer sent the counteroffer. They accepted it within 24 hours. No haggling. No arguments. They just wanted it done. They wanted me gone. The papers are being drawn up now. Soon, I will sign a document that will financially sever me from the family I was born into. And instead of sadness, I feel an incredible sense of lightness. They thought this was their final move, their way of exiling me with a check. They think they're cutting me out. But what they don't understand is that they're not cutting me out. They're letting me go. And it's the greatest gift they've ever given me. They've finally, officially, made me free. My priceless reaction is this, a profound and lasting peace. The embarrassment is finally off the market.